This is Sheila Karuna, and we are back with A Soul's Journey by Peter Richelieu. For those of you that may be following along, I am on chapter 1. I have not come to convert you to any new faith, any new philosophy. I have not been sent to you by him who is my master to provide answers to the questions which puzzle you at present. The only way in which I can do this is to tell you about the fundamental facts of life in the hope that this will give you a foundation of knowledge through which you can build up a philosophy on your own. I'm sorry, of your own. I shall also assist you in gaining practical experience through which you can prove things for yourself. Much of what I say will sound unusual to you, but in many lives I have studied much and had proof of which has convinced me that certain facts are true. And I want to stop here and say this. That is exactly how I view my life now. I'm 63 years old and I am on a quest to find the truth of who I am. And it started out of it sort of superficially, just trying to get to know my likes, my dislikes at the end of my last relationship, 28 and a half year relationship, because it dawned on me that, hey, I don't even know who I am and what I want to be when I grow up. And my consciousness has grown ever since then. And I really feel like this has been a validating thing here. Uh, and I'm on a mission to prove things to myself. That's why this book, I think, resonated so much with me. Back to the book here. I have no desire that you accept what I say as facts or truth. For you can only do so when you get to know such things within your own consciousness, which is for me why I say each one of us is unique and everyone must develop their own way for their own quest. Well, I suspect that we are all being given the opportunity to evolve our consciousness on the planet, and each being gets to decide whether or not they want to participate in that. Doesn't mean that you're not going to ever do it. It's just maybe you're not ready for that. Back to the book. There is an old saying of the Lord Buddha, who founded the religion which bears his name, which illustrates my point. One day, one of his disciples came to him and said, Lord, whom shall I believe? One man telleth me this, and another that, and both seem sure they are right. The Buddha replied, My son, believe not that which any man saith, not even I, the Lord Buddha, unless it appeals to your common sense. And even then, do not believe it, but treat it as a reasonable hypothesis until such time as you can prove it for yourself. And honestly, in this day and age, right now, with AI, deep fakes, cheap fakes, all of that kind of thing, that is paramount. That is key to develop one's own discernment. And that goes for even most especially for authorities that want to tell you this is the best way, because it's not necessarily so. Ask me how I know that. We'll talk about my foray into the medical industrial complex another time. Back to the book. First of all, I shall give you a rough outline of the path, which is called evolution, and of how that indefinable thing called life is found to flow through the kingdoms of nature. Of the source of life, I can give you no idea. I do know that I have never met anyone who did. But does that matter? All thinking men are agreed that there must be a creative power behind the universe. Whether we think of that power as a personal God or just the power of creation does not seem to be a matter of great importance. There are many who still like to think of God as a venerable old man with a beard, an idealistic figure based on the highest that each person can imagine, but with unlimited powers and an understanding of justice that is unequaled amongst men. Who shall say that such an idea is foolish? It may satisfy many, but it has no foundation in fact, for no man lives who can speak with knowledge of either the creation of the universe or of that thing which we call life. Although we cannot analyze life, we can contact it. Who has not seen an animal or a human living one minute and dead the next? What has happened during that minute? Certainly something has gone out of the body which one saw in action, and left behind the still flesh, which even as one looks seems to start to disintegrate and return to Mother Earth. So we can recognize life as a fact, although we may not be able to understand it, and certainly we cannot create it, as we can so many other things in these enlightened days. The mind of man has produced many synthetic aids to nature, but not synthetic life. The word of science tells us, and I guess that's not so true now from all reports. However, again, who knows what's so and what's not so and on that score. The world of science tells us that life is found in all the four kingdoms of nature: the mineral, the vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms. We do not need to be told that there is life in the animal and human kingdoms. We can see that for ourselves. But it is more difficult to credit that there is life in the mineral and vegetable kingdoms also. Reliable sources tell us that even rocks have life, and that when the life force is withdrawn from such rocks, they commence to decay. In time, they crumble and return to the dust, much as the human body does. Though the process takes a longer time, it is certainly easier for us to accept the fact that vegetables have life than that rocks have. For when they are withdrawn from the ground, the source of life in their case, we see for ourselves that they wither and die. In due time, they become dust, as do all living things when the life force is withdrawn. Philosophers trace life still further into an additional kingdom, which they term the superhuman kingdom. For when man has conquered the human kingdom, his evolution does not come to a sudden end, but goes on upwards, ever upwards, until at last it reaches the source from which it sprang. How many countless ages before this one? No mere man has been able to even guess. They state further that life is progressive, as are all things in nature, and that the goal of life is experience. This it garners and harvests as it progresses through the kingdom of nature, from the lowest form in which life is found to the highest, which can be described as the perfect man, or a quote, man made perfect. Next, we must consider what is the difference between life as found in the mineral kingdom and life as we know it in the animal and human kingdoms. Its essence is undoubtedly the same, for as I have stated, the origin of all life is divine. But how different is its expression when life starts functioning as various minerals? It has no individuality as we understand such a thing at the human level. In the lower types of minerals, the life force, after having gained the experience it must obtain, passes into the higher forms. Later, it passes to the lower type of vegetable, and so to the higher types of the same kingdom. All this takes many thousands of years as time is reckoned on this planet. But it is only when life passes from the vegetable to the animal kingdom that any sort of division becomes apparent. Even at this stage, there is no individuality, but merely a group consciousness or group soul, common to all the different animals of the same species, which works on and directs those animals from without. And I want to pause here because just now as I was reading that, I was flashed how when groups like packs of animals, they all look at the same time and they all react. There are things like the what are those the starlings. They actually move almost as one. It's very easy to see how this could very possibly be the case. And when one contemplates evolution in the way that it would appear it's going, right? This absolutely makes some sense, at least to me. When the life force passes to the human kingdom, an indwelling spirit or ego inhabits each individual body and dictates the thoughts and actions of every human being. At this stage of evolution, group souls have an influence upon races, but none on individuals who now have free will. And now that must refer to, it says upon races. Wow, I just saw that. See, I told you I've read this many times. I was just flashed the oversoul type, like there's different oversouls for a particular race. Wow, that's really very interesting. So as each individual being has experience, lived into wisdom, that colors the overall oversoul. Oh, wow, that's very, very cool to contemplate. Back to the book. To animals, man is a super animal, just as to man, a perfect man is a superman. It is unfortunate to find that this super animal is inclined to act with cruelty to his younger brothers rather than with compassion and understanding. In fact, he seems to be the main cause of the suffering they undergo. If man killed only for the purpose of obtaining food, as animals do, or because a wild animal is threatening to kill him, that might be regarded as conforming to the laws of nature. But he tortures animals by various means so that his womenfolk may be adorned with furs and feathers, and he kills for what he terms, quote, sport, when he practices his, quote, skill in marksmanship, regardless of the suffering he may cause to those not so well equipped as himself. All this thoughtless cruelty brings into manifestation the emotion of fear, the most retarding of all emotions. Fear of the super animal begins in the lowest forms of animal life and continues throughout the animal kingdom till animals contact man in domestic life. Then the fear that was born in the early stages is slowly but surely replaced by love. Until this happens, the progress of animals along the evolutionary path is slow. I shall trace for you the passage of the life force through the animal kingdom. Try to imagine the life force as constituting the water of a slowly moving canal. It is bounded on both sides by the banks of the canal, thus giving the impression of a controlled purpose. There is practically no difference in this stream when passing through the mineral and vegetable kingdoms, but there is a distinct change as it emerges from the canal into the conditions ruling the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom is a complex structure of different levels of evolution, from microbes and worms through the wild animals of the jungle to the animals which man has domesticated. In passing through the animal kingdom, the life force acquires the coloration of experience. It takes form as, shall we say, myriads of tadpoles. The life force was contained in the larvae, which were produced by a frog. In due course, it emerged as many thousands of tadpoles. These were born to contact life and to gain experience, which will color the water that was clear. Many tadpoles die in infancy, never reaching their destiny as frogs, and these units of water may be said to return to the soul groups, scarcely colored at all. Some become frogs, and although through lack of food or for 1,000 different reasons their lives may be short, when they eventually come to an end, the units of water comprising these young frogs return to their soul groups, colored only with the small experience of discomfort or suffering due to the cause of their deaths. Others live longer and in due course contact human life. The frog learns to fear its tormentors, to run from them, to hide when possible and avoid contact with them. In due course, it dies either by a natural death, which in the majority of cases is unlikely, by the unthinking cruelty of the human kingdom, or by an attack from one of the natural enemies of the frogs, such as snakes. When the units of water comprising these fragments of life return to the compartments, their experience most certainly colors the water, which when it started out was clear, with many colors expressing sufferings in its its diverse forms. The whole experience blended together leaves that compartment colored with the experiences of all the units, none of which has a separate identity, all being part of the complete soul group. After one or two lives at this stage of evolution, the life force, with its accumulated water experiences, passes to the next level. Instead of tens of thousands of tadpoles, it is divided into about 10,000 units of rats or mice, for example. The rat is born with a fear of the human being and of its natural enemies, for is not the water colored with the fear that was brought back from the lives lived in the earlier stage. In this series of lives, fear continues to grow. In his early life, the rat is taught by bitter experience to avoid man at all costs, to work by night when man is less of a terror than by day. And if he manages to live to a ripe old age, it is certainly due to his cunning and mastery of methods of circumventing his natural enemies. While I was still pondering his final words, I looked up and the room was empty. I sat quite still for a whole and tried to grab, I don't know what that is, a whole something. It doesn't say anything, it just says for a whole. I think that's, oh, for a while, thank you. I sat quite still for a while and I tried to grasp the idea of what he had said. And after a time, much of it came back. At first, I did not consider whether I believed it or not. That did not seem to matter. It was all so new. But it certainly was interesting already, although I was tired. I began to look forward to the morrow, for I was confident he would return. This bit where he says he was tired, I noticed early on in my quest that as I was entertaining brand new concepts that were being introduced to my consciousness, I sometimes did get very tired. There were a time or two where, in taking in these new concepts, all I could do was to keep my eyes open. It was all I could do. And and sometimes for me, I now realize that is a way that my consciousness is trying to integrate this information. Not that it's necessarily too much, although once one begins to drift off, if it while contemplating, to me, for me, the way it works is that that is a sign that it's time to do a little rest, a little meditation, and maybe integrate some of what I've just been exposing myself to. So back to the book. The following day, I sat at my desk with my eyes on the door. I was determined I would be on the lookout to see if he opened the door or came through it. But if I expected something supernatural to happen, I was disappointed. For just on 11 o'clock, the door opened noiselessly in the ordinary way, and he greeted me as I should have expected him to do, just by saying, "Well, are you ready to hear more, or did I bore you yesterday?" I suppose my reply must have satisfied him, for he continued from where he left off. The level of evolution of the life force reached in the wild animals is as far removed from the humble worm as he is from the plant world. The animals themselves live by the natural law, which is the survival of the strongest. And the keynote of the animal kingdom is self-preservation. The weaker animals are killed for food, and fear for survival colors the experiences of all such animals from the day they are born to the day they die, whether their death be a natural one or due to the exploitation of the stronger animal or a bullet from the gun of a hunter. Is it any wonder that the predominating instinct of all wild animals is fear? Fear of the stronger animals and fear of the super animal called man? Many lives are lived by group souls in the bodies of wild animals because in such incarnations they learn the important lessons of self-preservation and the necessity to work in order to survive. For the obtaining of food alone for each and every animal becomes a daily duty, which can never be neglected. During the periods when food is scarce, the instinct of the animal teaches it to seek new pastures and to learn adaptability, which will stand the soul in good stead when the time comes for it to emerge as a separate human entity. Maternal instinct is in evidence for the first time in this stage of the life of the group soul. I have said enough for you to realize that the wild animals represent the top of the spiral, covering the lives lived by the group soul in the animal kingdom. For when ready to progress further, the group soul inhabits bodies that bring it closer and closer touch with the human kingdom, to which it must pass in the fullness of time. In their wild state, elephants, donkeys, and buffaloes will fight wildly against capture by man, and when caught, it is only if they are tamed by kindness that they become at all domesticated and willing to use their natural powers in the interest of human progress. Even after years of captivity, they seldom become really domesticated. However, in the lives which follow, they are mostly born in captivity. Therefore, their environment from birth teaches them to lose some of the natural fear that past lives have produced in them. The most evolved of this group are the cattle, for they are often stall fed in the winter months, and it is generally admitted that the providing of food for an animal does more to gain its confidence and eradicate its natural fear of man than anything else. Slowly but surely, some of this fear of the human race is obliterated, and the group soul is ready to pass into its last stage in the animal world, that of the truly domesticated animals: the horse, the dog, and the cat. The group soul, which in the beginning went out seeking experience in the form of approximately 10,000 tadpoles, has gradually but surely divided itself into fewer and fewer parts until, in the last stages of the animal kingdom, it is in two parts only, as two horses, two dogs, or two cats. When the group soul has evolved to the stage where it is divided in half, it is in every way domesticated and has come to understand man as he really is. Now the possibility of its individualizing as a separate human ego becomes a fact. How many lives still have to be lived by this group soul depends entirely on the human beings to whom these two animals are attached. If one of the two owners of these horses, dogs, or cats is not an animal lover, and therefore the treatment meted out to the animal is unsympathetic or cruel, then some of the fear, which in the last 20 lives has been partly eradicated, will come back again, and more lives must be lived before individualization can take place. I cannot emphasize too often or too strongly that if people realized how important it is for them to make friends of all domestic animals and to do their part in making them understand man, then this last stage would be reached much more quickly than is often the case. Please understand this clearly. No group soul can individualize into a human soul until all fear of the human race has been overcome. Love is not an emotion which relates exclusively to the human kingdom. In its highest form, it encompasses all nature. Therefore, man's part in animal evolution is to see that in the true sense, quote, perfect love casteth out fear, end quote. For without understanding help, the progress of animals on the evolutionary path can be retarded for an unlimited period of time. How does individualization eventually take place? It can come about in one of two ways: through the pathway of either the heart or the head, which varies with the type of animal. It can be said that a dog most frequently passes into the human kingdom through love and or sacrifice. Often a dog is so devoted to his master or to the family of his adoption that in an emergency his instinct of self preservation completely deserts him and he sacrifices his life to save that of his master or a member of the family. It is not essential for either dog to have made the supreme sacrifice of its life for the group soul to individualize. When a dog has learned all the lessons it was meant to learn in the animal kingdom, and when all fear of the human race has been eradicated, it would be a waste of time for the group soul to continue with more incarnations in the animal form. Its destiny is then elsewhere. So a transfer to a new and more enlightened sphere of existence takes place. The first incarnation in a human body is not necessarily passed in a body as undeveloped as the lowest type of human being on the earth. For often the new ego, through having gained much experience in its last few lives in the animal kingdom, especially one who has given up his own life for a human, has earned the right of a human body slightly more developed than the most undeveloped type found in the world. A horse individualizes in a way similar to that of a dog by outstanding devotion to its master. Often one has heard of a horse making a stupendous effort when called upon to do so, only to drop down dead when the effort has been successful. While a dog or horse passes into the human kingdom through devotion and or sacrifice, so a cat earns the right to live as a higher entity by learning to understand man. In olden days, many philosophers said that a dog and a horse can earn the right to progress by devotion, whereas a cat employs cunning, the first glimmering of the faculty of reason. We can see instances of elephants who have been trained to serve man and monkeys who have lived in the right types of zoological gardens who obviously qualify in this respect, and in surroundings devoid of fear, they have used their brains and so can be said to understand, to a limited extent, the ways of man. Animals which miss out a life as domesticated animals go into the lowest form of human body that is known in the world. On the other hand, the group souls of many highly evolved dogs miss out on having to inhabit the bodies of the lowest form of human life known, and are born into bodies of a more evolved type of man, probably as members of tribes who for generations have served mankind. Before passing on to the early lives of the human race, wait a minute, I gotta have a sip of water, one moment. Thank you for your patience. Before passing on to the early lives of the human race, with its tremendous differences from life in the animal kingdom, I must mention the case of the animal which individualizes as a human whilst still occupying an animal body. The transfer from the animal sphere to the human must take place when the right time comes, when all fear is gone, and when the love side of the animal uh, has been sufficiently developed. In a case where one dog, which is half a group soul, has died a natural death, and where the second half of the group soul, another dog, remains alive, but has no more lessons to learn, this dog becomes a human being in every other than form. Doubtless you have come across cases where a dog in later life seemed, quote, almost human, where it appeared to understand almost every word that was said to it, and where its uncanny understanding of your thoughts and actions savored of an intuition beyond what you imagined to be possible in any animal. Such a dog is, in fact, a quote, human dog, an animal in form, but a human in intelligence, and one able to reason and make decisions for which it alone would be responsible. The main difference between a human being and an animal is the faculty of reason, with it the gift of free will. A man knows the difference between right and wrong, even in his early lives as a human being. He can make his own decisions. Well, for me, there's a little bit of I feel a different way about that. We all act according to our programming and conditioning with those decisions. Whereas an animal has to obey the laws of the animal world. An animal lives by instinct, and outside the limits of instinct, it cannot think. A man can choose the evil path, even though he knows it is evil and against the progressive forces that rule the world. But an animal must ever act as its instinct compels it, for such is the law. Once again, I did not see him go, for my mind was so full of these strange ideas. I decided to write down everything I could remember of these two talks and come to the conclusion that I would make shorthand notes of all future talks. Well, that's the end of chapter 1, and chapter 2 is coming right up. I hope you'll stick around. If you're new, we'd love to have you subscribe. Please do like this video and share it around. I really think that the more beings expose themselves to concepts and puzzle pieces for their own consciousness evolution, the better. So until we meet again, be well, my friends.